Off our discussion tonight, Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. And Mika Ouyang, former staff member for the House Intelligence Committee. She is an MSNBC contributor. Thank you to all three of you joining us. Congressman, I want to start with you and the new evidence that we have seen, or the new disclosures that we've seen about the notes having to do with Lev Parnas and Rudy Giuliani and Ukraine, including the news, which we haven't even told our audience yet, that it appears that Maria Yovanovitch, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, was being surveilled. She was being tracked. Her movements were being tracked. Her cell phone was being tracked by Americans. This is kind of incredible. What do you make of it in light of the fact that the impeachment articles are expected to go over to the Senate tomorrow?
I never thought I could be more surprised, but I guess the Trump administration continues its path. This is deeply disturbing. Who gave the orders to do this, to surveil a United States ambassador? And did it lead to the warning that she needs to move back, that they feared for her safety operating in Ukraine? Safety from whom? Who was making these threats? Obviously, this requires another full investigation to make sure this sort of thing never happens again, and those responsible are held accountable.
I want to read to you what the chairs of the committees investigating the investigation into the impeachment wrote. Chairs Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney, and Elliot Engel wrote these documents, and those recently released pursuant to Freedom of Information Act demonstrate that there's more evidence relevant to the president's scheme, but they have been concealed by the president himself. All of this new evidence confirms what we already know. The president and his associates pursued Ukrainian officials to announce investigations that would benefit the president politically. There cannot be a full and fair trial in the Senate without the documents that President Trump is refusing to provide to Congress. Now, that's a letter. What do you do about this? What do you do about the fact that there is new evidence that ultimately may influence how a vote goes in the Senate?
Well, look, we need four Republican senators to develop a backbone to do the right thing that 72% of the American people want. They want those documents. They want those witnesses to come forth and tell us what we need to know, what the president is hiding. The fact of the matter is this is only one subpoena. There's 5 major subpoenas of documents that they have blocked, 9 major witnesses that we have subpoenaed who refuse to testify.
Jill, let me ask you about this. Maria Yovanovitch's lawyer has put out a response to the idea that she was being tracked. Her physical movements were being tracked with her phone, and her computer use were being tracked. The lawyer, Lawrence Robbins, says, needless to say, the notion that American citizens and others were monitoring Ambassador Yovanovitch's movements for unknown purposes is disturbing. We trust that the appropriate authorities will conduct an investigation to determine what happened. Except it seems like whoever was involved in this was involved in whatever it is that the drug deal that John Bolton said that Giuliani and Trump were involved in. So I don't know who's going to investigate, but this does seem to be a serious matter.
It's particularly alarming, and you are exactly correct, because William Barr, who should be doing this, is looking exactly the other way and doing everything he can to defend the president and not to find the truth and the facts. These are things that should not be going on against any American citizen, overseas or at home. And yet it was happening, and the evidence seems to be growing dramatically. And I want to point out that it is not unusual for evidence to come out after an indictment, which the impeachment is. And during Watergate, the smoking gun tape was gotten through a trial subpoena. We had already returned indictments and had all of the evidence that was for pretrial. But once we indicted, we issued another subpoena to get more evidence for the trial. The standard of proof at a trial is beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard of proof to indict is just that there's probable cause to bring someone to trial. And so it makes a lot of sense that there be a full and fair hearing, that there be witnesses, that all of these people whose documents we're now seeing should be testifying, along with Bolton and Giuliani and Parnas and Duffy and maybe Pompeo and many others who should be before the Senate. You cannot have exoneration after a trial unless you actually have a trial. And that requires these documents and that the witnesses come forward.
Well, except, Mika, the president will say that he's exonerated if he doesn't get convicted by the Senate. But they're interesting matters because there are a lot of senators talking about the fact that whatever you think about the president, this isn't illegal. These aren't even crimes, let alone high crimes, except we're hearing these things from Lev Parnas that sound very much like crimes. We're hearing about the withholding of congressionally approved military assistance to Ukraine, that it's not legal for that. It's very specifically not legal for the president to hold that kind of money back or to redirect that kind of money. So at some point, the argument starts to ring hollow that no laws have been broken in the midst of whatever it was that started in May and ended in September between the president of the United States and the president of Ukraine.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, Lev Parnas was indicted on a criminal matter for his involvement in this scheme in which the president was an actual actor. These text messages show that part of what Lev Parnas was indicted for was trying to get Yovanovitch fired, and that he and Rudy Giuliani were involved in this up to their necks, that Giuliani was in communication with the White House about this, and that the president actually fired Yovanovitch. Now, I think there's some real questions here about what the president knew, when did he knew it, and how all these things transferred. But the president in these documents says that his own personal lawyer can go represent Lev Parnas. So he has a very tight relationship here. We need to know more about it, which is why they need to call the witnesses.
It's completely wild, Congressman. I mean, the average mind can't get their head around what Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, and Lev Parnas were doing, trying to get Marie Yovanovitch fired. At some point, you've got Lev Parnas, who tweeted, by the way, his lawyer tweeted, Mr. Parnas remains committed to testifying as to all the actions he took in Ukraine on behalf of Donald Trump. And you've got John Bolton saying he's ready to testify. At some point, if the Senate and Mitch McConnell are not going to deal with this, is there a role for the House or maybe your Intel committee?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the chairman has said that we haven't ruled that out. And as we're learning in these days that the investigation continues. No matter what happens in the coming weeks, the investigation must continue because people have to be held accountable. The American people have to know what took place. This is just one element of that. The facts and the issues involved with the Russian investigation are still relevant because everything in this investigation, as we've learned, ties back to Russia, their actions through the president, through Ukraine. It is an unholy mess, but we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, there's new developments on that front, too, which we're going to be talking about with Malcolm Nance in a minute. But Jill Wine-Banks, let's talk about the idea that there are people out there. Give us a legal perspective on the fact that there are people out there, too. Highly key to this whole thing. If you have John Bolton, who was sitting in the White House, involved in all these discussions, and you have Lev Parnas, who was apparently the Where's Waldo of this thing. He's all over the world trying to do someone's bidding. Is it Rudy Giuliani? Is it President Trump's? And they're prepared to testify. How does the legal world, I understand this is not a completely legal process, but how does the legal world think about two people central to something that a lot of people think is criminal activity offering to testify?
I think that Americans want to hear this. I think the overwhelming number of people have said witnesses are necessary. And I think that that's what will eventually happen, if only because politically it will become impossible. Yes, the senators can vote against having witnesses. And I think if our Chief Justice is going to take anything seriously about presiding over an impeachment trial, he will rule that witnesses are necessary. And if they overrule him by voting against it, there should be severe political consequences. People will see that the senators voting against those witnesses are part of the cover-up. That's what it will be, is they are concealing, and it's so many things right now. The president's taxes, the cost of how much he is spending for security, for going to his own golf club, for the Secret Service agents' golf carts, for his adult children's to travel. They want to hold that off until after the election. But Americans deserve to have these facts before they vote, not after they voted. So we need to get them out there, and people need to go to their congressman and say, Congressman Quigley and all of you, vote to get these pieces of evidence. And if it has to go back to the House to get these, then they should. Bolton said he would testify to the Senate. There's no reason why he wouldn't testify to the House. He is a risk. We don't know what he's going to say.
Right.
We don't know what's motivating him. So it's a high risk, but he said he wants to testify. He says he has information.